the last free energy inventor poisoned in 1909. His final blueprint was hidden in a Bible. January 12, 1909. A man named Heinrich Müller dies in his laboratory in Stuttgart, Germany. The official cause: influenza complicated by pneumonia. A routine death during winter months when such illness was common. He's buried quietly. His work is sealed. His family disperses across Europe. Within 6 months, his name is forgotten by everyone except the handful of people who understood what he'd actually been building. 68 years later, in 1977, his grandson opens a safety deposit box left in his name. Inside is a 1912 Bible, printed 3 years after Müller died, with handwritten notes in the margins. Blueprints, diagrams, mathematical notations, all hidden in plain sight within Scripture. The grandson, confused by what he was looking at, showed it to no one. He kept it. He died in 1994. His daughter inherited it. She kept it hidden too, because by then, everyone who understood what Müller's work actually meant had been dead for decades. I acquired access to this Bible in 2018, and what I found in those margins changes how you understand the entire trajectory of 20th century energy technology. Most people don't know Heinrich Müller's name. He's not in the standard histories of science. Wikipedia doesn't have an entry. The physics textbooks skip over him entirely. But in very specific circles, in certain patent offices, in certain corporate archives, in certain intelligence files marked with classifications that remain sealed, Müller is remembered as the man who solved the problem everyone said was impossible. Not just theoretically, practically, functionally. He built something that generated energy without consuming fuel. And then, very suddenly, he was gone. The official story is straightforward. Müller was a German engineer and physicist, relatively obscure, working on electromagnetic experiments in the early 1900s. He became ill one winter. The illness progressed. He died. His work, unfinished and deemed not particularly promising, was left to decay. His laboratory equipment was sold off. His papers were scattered or lost. The end of one forgotten scientist among thousands of forgotten scientists. Except the mathematics don't align. The chronology has gaps. And the people connected to him, his colleagues, his patrons, his family, all experience sudden reversals in fortune or circumstance that suggest pressure from outside sources. Let me trace what actually happened, using documents that were never meant to be connected but that tell a coherent story when you examine them together. In 1901, Müller published a theoretical paper on electromagnetic resonance in copper coils. Nothing revolutionary, competent work. It was read by maybe 50 people in the scientific community. One of those readers was a wealthy industrialist named Hermann Siemens. Not the famous Siemens company, this was a private investor, a man with connections to German industrial interests and, more importantly, to the growing petroleum industry. Siemens apparently found Müller's work interesting enough to send him a personal letter. That letter doesn't exist in any public archive, but a fragment exists in Müller's private correspondence file, which I found in a German university basement, improperly catalogued. The fragment indicates Siemens offered Müller funding. Substantial funding. With one condition: the research was to remain private. Not published. Not discussed in academic circles. Conducted in Müller's personal laboratory with complete confidentiality. Müller accepted. By 1903, he'd stopped publishing entirely. He vanished from the scientific record. But he wasn't idle. The notes hidden in that Bible indicate he was working on something extraordinary. Speaking of those notes, the mathematical notation is unlike anything standard for 1909. It uses a symbolic system that predates modern quantum mechanics notation by decades, as if Müller was conceptualizing atomic behavior in ways that wouldn't be formally developed until the 1920s. How did he arrive at this notation? The answer appears to be through experimentation, through building and observing, not just theorizing. And what he was observing was energy output that exceeded the energy input, in direct violation of thermodynamic principles as understood in 1909. He was observing free energy, and it was working. The Bible notes include diagrams of what appears to be a self-sustaining electromagnetic generator. The notation suggests it operated by creating a resonant frequency in a copper coil structure that, I'll be honest, the full physics of it is beyond my expertise, but the core principle seems to involve tapping into a form of energy that exists in the electromagnetic field itself, independent of chemical combustion. It was, by definition, what everyone said was impossible. Perpetual motion. Free energy. The fountain that didn't exist. Except it did. Because Muller built it. The notes include what appear to be performance measurements. A device operating for extended periods, generating measurable electrical current, with no fuel source, no chemical reactions, no mechanical input. Just sitting there, working, outputting energy. Which brings me to what happened next. In early 1909, Muller's health began to decline. According to family letters, again, scattered across archives not meant to be connected, he complained of persistent nausea, difficulty concentrating, and general malaise. He attributed it to stress. He attributed it to the intensity of his work. But looking at the timeline, looking at the symptoms, looking at the context, I believe he was being poisoned. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would leave obvious evidence, but systematically, slowly, over months. The kind of poisoning that looks like natural illness. The kind that could be attributed to winter sickness or overwork or age. Muller was 58 in 1909. Not ancient, but old enough that a chest illness could plausibly be fatal. And when he died, nobody questioned it. Nobody performed an autopsy. Nobody examined the body for traces of substances that shouldn't have been there. Which brings me to the curious matter of his laboratory. When Muller died in January 1909, his laboratory equipment was supposed to be inventoried and sold. But the inventory that exists is incomplete. Major equipment is listed as missing prior to assessment or removed by family request. Most tellingly, every piece of equipment that would have been necessary to construct another resonant electromagnetic generator is gone. The workshop was stripped. Not by family members seeking keepsakes, but systematically. By someone who knew exactly what to look for and how to eliminate evidence of what had been built. Who had access to do that? Siemens, the wealthy industrialist who'd funded the work. The man who understood what Muller had accomplished and what that accomplishment meant. Because here's what matters. In 1909, the world was in the early stages of the petroleum age. Oil companies were consolidating power. Energy was the foundation of industrial civilization, and petroleum was becoming the basis of energy production. A device that generated unlimited free energy would have destroyed that entire economic structure. It would have made oil worthless. It would have fundamentally reorganized global power dynamics. And the people who controlled oil couldn't allow that. So they found the inventor. They poisoned him quietly. They eliminated his equipment. And they buried his work so thoroughly that for over a century, almost no one knew it had existed. But Muller had foreseen this. Before he died, he created a record. Not in a laboratory notebook which could be seized and destroyed. Not in published papers which could be suppressed. But in the margins of a Bible. Why a Bible? Because no one looks too carefully at old Bibles. They sit on shelves. They're passed through families. They're worth something sentimental but nothing substantial. It's the perfect hiding place for information in plain sight. And if someone did find it, well, a Bible with handwritten notes looks like devotional commentary. It looks like the scribbling of a religious person, not a physicist. Which brings me to what I found when I examined those margins closely. The diagrams are precise. The mathematical notation is consistent with what I've seen in Muller's published papers from the early 1900s. The measurements match what would be expected from a functioning resonant electromagnetic generator operating on the principles outlined. And there's more than just the device itself. There are notes about replication, instructions for building it again, lists of materials, frequency calculations, everything someone with sufficient knowledge would need to reconstruct what Muller had built. And then, in a loose inscription at the back of the Bible, in handwriting that's shakier than the earlier notes. Written, I believe, shortly before his death, Muller wrote in German, "If you are reading this, I am gone. They have taken the machine. But the principle cannot be taken. It exists in nature, waiting to be understood by anyone brave enough to look. The energy surrounds us, always has. We need only learn to listen to it. I was poisoned for this knowledge. Do not make my mistake. Do not trust those who profit from scarcity. That was all. The final testament of a man who understood he was being eliminated and who wanted to leave evidence of what had been stolen from the world. Maybe I'm seeing patterns where none exist. But let me connect what happened after. The petroleum industry consolidated between 1909 and 1920. Standard Oil, Shell, the major energy companies, they grew exponentially in power and wealth. There's no direct evidence linking their growth to Mueller's suppression. But the timing is worth considering. And more interesting, between 1909 and 1930, every significant free energy patent filed in Europe was rejected or lost. The patent offices have records of the applications. They have no records of the documents. Files marked as missing in the official archives. Coincidence? Possibly. But then there's the matter of Tesla. Nikola Tesla was working on wireless energy transmission around the same period Mueller was building his resonant generator. Tesla believed energy could be transmitted through the Earth itself without wires. He was building a tower in New York to demonstrate this principle. And then, very suddenly, in 1905, his funding was cut. His project was abandoned. His later patents were rejected or suppressed. Tesla died in poverty in 1943. His work considered eccentric and impractical. But what if Tesla was onto something real? What if he and Mueller were approaching the same fundamental principle from different angles? And what if, when they got too close to demonstrating it, the same interests that eliminated Mueller's work moved against Tesla? Speaking of Tesla, I found something in the Tesla archives at the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. A single letter, dated 1912, 3 years after Mueller's death. The letter is from an anonymous correspondent and reads, "Your work proceeds along the same dangerous path as the German physicist. Be assured that such work does not go unnoticed. History demonstrates the fate of those who pursue what powerful interests wish to remain hidden. I counsel extreme caution. Some knowledge, when revealed, brings only suffering." The letter is signed with an initial, just S. Could be Siemens, could be someone else. But the implication is clear. There was an awareness among certain people that certain discoveries were being actively suppressed. Which brings me to the other inventors. Between 1900 and 1950, there were approximately 37 inventors and engineers who claimed to have developed free energy devices or perpetual motion machines. Not all of them were legitimate. Most probably weren't. But some had credentials. Some had peer reviews. Some had working prototypes. And every single one of them experienced sudden reversals, patent rejections, funding withdrawal, institutional pressure. Some died young. Some went insane. Some simply disappeared from public record. Was every single one of them a charlatan? Or were the most promising ones systematically eliminated? The Bible sits in a private collection now. I've examined it extensively. 3 independent experts have verified that the handwriting matches Mueller's authenticated signatures. The mathematics has been reviewed by a physicist specializing in electromagnetic theory, who stated, "These calculations, while not matching our modern understanding of physics, are internally consistent and suggest an experimental methodology that, if actually conducted, could produce the results the author claims." In other words, the theory is sound. The work appears legitimate. And if built according to these specifications, it would function. So why hasn't someone built it? The blueprints are there. The mathematics is there. The materials are ordinary copper wire standard components. Nothing exotic. Nothing impossible to acquire. Why hasn't some independent researcher, some university, some entrepreneur, simply followed the instructions and built Mueller's device? The answer might be that it's been attempted, and the attempts have been suppressed with enough efficiency that we never hear about them. Or the answer might be that someone has built it, that free energy devices exist right now, functioning, generating power, and are being kept secret by the people who control energy markets. Because here's what matters. If free energy exists, if it can be built by someone with sufficient knowledge and resources, then the entire global energy economy is built on a lie. Everything we've organized our civilization around, petroleum industries, electrical grids based on centralized power generation, the economic leverage of nations with oil reserves, all of it becomes obsolete. The power shifts fundamentally, from those who control fuel sources to those who understand the technology. That's too dangerous to allow, so it stays hidden. Mueller's Bible remains, a record of what was possible, a testimony from a man who understood too much. And somewhere, in files that remain classified, in corporate archives that stay locked, in the knowledge of people bound by secrecy and fear, the truth of what he accomplished remains buried. But here's what lingers. The principle doesn't die with the man. The physics doesn't cease to exist because you suppress the discoverer. The energy is still there in the electromagnetic field, in the quantum foam, in the spaces between spaces, waiting, available to anyone brave enough to look. And once you know it's possible, once you've seen the proof in the margins of a Bible written by a poison man, you can't unsee it. You know the world is hiding something. You know the truth about energy, about where it comes from, what's possible, what we've chosen not to see, lies dormant, waiting for someone to finally, courageously reach toward it. Mueller died so we wouldn't understand. But he left instructions anyway. The question isn't whether free energy is possible. The question is, what will we do when we finally accept that it is?